For decades, they were seen as this miracle of modern chemistry. I'm talking about a class of compounds that honestly made our lives way more convenient, more durable. But here's the twist. The very companies that perfected these things, they're now running for the exits, and it's because of a storm they basically created themselves. So today, we're going to dive into this great corporate escape from what we call forever chemicals.
Yeah, think about that rain jacket you've got, the one that keeps you bone dry even in a total downpour. Ever wonder what the secret is to that crazy water resistance? Well, it's almost certainly these chemicals we're about to talk a lot about.
And it doesn't stop there. What about that nonstick pan you probably used for breakfast this morning? The one that makes cooking and, clean up a total breeze? Yep, they're in there too. Seriously, these substances are, well, they're practically everywhere.
So this brings us to the big question, right? The central mystery here. If these chemicals are so useful and so widespread, why are the biggest companies in the world suddenly treating them like they're toxic? I mean, what gives? To figure that out, we first have to get a handle on what exactly we're even talking about.
All right, so first things first, what are these forever chemicals? Let's break down the science behind all the headlines.
Okay, the technical name is PFAS. And get this, it's not just one chemical. It's a massive family of over 10,000 different synthetic compounds. And their superpower, the thing that made them so incredibly valuable to industry, is their resistance. I mean, they repel everything. Heat, water, oil, you name it. That's what made them so useful for so long.
But, that superpower? It's also their biggest curse. See, the bond at their chemical core, this carbon-fluorine bond, it's one of the strongest ones out there. And that means they just don't break down. Not in nature, not anywhere. They stick around for decades, building up in the environments and, in our bodies. And as we've learned more, scientists have linked them to a whole host of serious health risks. And that is the fundamental problem at the heart of this whole story.
So you've got this combination of something that never goes away and is potentially really harmful. And that has created, well, a perfect storm. And the first part of that storm? It's a legal tsunami, one that's been building for years and is now crashing down with full force. I mean, just look at this number. Over 4,500 lawsuits. And let that sink in. That's for one company, BASF. Most of these are happening in the US, and a lot of them are tied to things like fighting foam that got into local water supplies. The scale of this legal battle is it's enormous.
And here's the thing. This isn't some short-term problem that these companies can just ride out. As one analyst put it, this litigation risk is going to stick around for many years, if not decades to come. Think about it. As more and more personal injury claims pop up, the financial hit could just keep going and going. For a lot of these companies, the calculation has changed. The profit just isn't worth the price anymore.
Okay, so lawsuits are one huge piece of the puzzle. The second major driver, it's not just the courts, it's the governments. All around the world, but especially in Europe, they are building a regulatory wall that's getting pretty much impossible for these companies to ignore.
And this slide really captures that shift perfectly. Then, for decades, it was just widespread, unquestioned use in thousands of products. But now, we are in a totally different world. The European Union is actively working on a broad ban on pretty much all PFAS, with very, very few exceptions. For these big companies, the writing is on the wall.
And this quote from the EU's Environment Commissioner makes their intention crystal clear. They want to simplify and give clarity on PFAS. And that clarity is pointing straight towards massive restrictions, if not an outright ban. Now, if you're a giant multinational company, the idea of trying to deal with a messy patchwork of different rules all over the world, well, suddenly a single global exit strategy starts to look really, really appealing.
So, what do you do when you're facing this two-pronged attack of legal and regulatory pressure? Well, the companies at the heart of all this are responding, and they're doing it by staging a full-on strategic retreat from one of their most famous and profitable product lines.
And let's look at the specifics here. You've got 3M, one of the original pioneers of this stuff, vowing to completely exit PFAS manufacturing globally by the end of 2025. Then there's Ecolab, phasing them out by the end of 2026. And BASF, the European giant, is pulling them from their product lineup too. I mean, these are huge commitments from some of the biggest players in the industry.
And make no mistake, this isn't just a couple of big companies trying to get some good PR. An industry survey found that a full 1/3 of all chemical producers are now planning to get out of the PFAS game. This is a real trend. It's a genuine industry-wide pivot away from these chemicals.
So where does all this leave us? The companies are heading for the door, but believe me, this story is far from over.
Now, the official story you'll hear from companies like BASF is that they're just pivoting. They're working hard to develop and offer safer alternatives for their customers. It's a very forward-looking, innovation-focused narrative that they're putting out there.
But let's be real about the motivation here. A statement from 3M really cuts to the chase. This decision wasn't born in a lab out of some sudden desire for greener chemistry. No, it was driven by external pressure. When they say accelerating regulatory trends, they mean things like the EU ban. And changing stakeholder expectations? Well, that's the mountain of lawsuits and the growing public outcry.
And all of this leaves us with one massive, lingering question. The corporate world is finally responding to all this pressure. Production is stopping, but these chemicals are called forever for a reason. They're already out there, in our environment, in our water, in us. So while this phase-out is a huge, monumental step, it really makes you wonder, right? Are we just closing the barn door after the horse is already bolted?